to this episode of StreetRat Garage Extra. I'd like to take a moment to remind you, go ahead and hit that like button, give it a thumbs up, but most importantly, subscribe to the channel. We have a lot of things that are coming up this coming summer. It's not quite spring yet, but things are already starting to happen. And we have plans on going to Cletus and Cars that's coming up in a couple months. Hopefully the Hot Rod Power Tour goes off without a hitch, and we can do that. So there's going to be a lot of interesting content to come, plus a ton of other things, a lot of events that will be showing on StreetRat Garage. So make sure to subscribe, at least subscribe, like it if you hit the like button, give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below, tell us what kind of things you would like to see, what kind of events you're interested in. We'll try our best to go to as many events as possible. Now, on this episode of StreetRat Garage Extra, we will be taking a look into what not to do on your small block 350 build. Actually, this should pertain to any build that you're doing. So let's have a look. So in the garage today, we'll be reviewing my Chevy small block 350 board 30 over. This engine was built probably 25 years ago. This is the first engine that I built. I won't say that I assembled it. I ordered all these parts and had a machine shop assemble this engine, do all the block work. They assembled the short block, and then I pretty much just put the accessories on because I was new to the business and did not know a whole lot about engine building at the time. Not that I do now, but even less then. So I ordered all of these parts. I went down to the local speed shop. I actually didn't order these online because we didn't do that sort of stuff then. So this has all come from like 3 different speed shops in the Indianapolis area. 2 of those shops are no longer around, but I did everything, almost everything incorrectly on the build of this engine. So let me give you an overview of what we have. This is I think it's a mid-70s, now I can't remember. Just mid-70s, yeah, it's a 010 casting block. It's just a 2-bolt main block, which is fine to use if you build it correctly. Now, I took this down to the machine shop, had a board 30 over. The good things that we did is we had the crank balanced, we had the rods also reconditioned and balanced, studded the bottom of the block. It's just a 2-bolt main, but we had it studded, give it a little more strength on the bottom. We used a fluid dampener. When I say we, I mean me. I used a fluid dampener, so pretty much eliminating all of the vibrations that would be detrimental in the bottom end assembly. Good part. I even use an SFI certified balanced flywheel on the back as well. So everything at the very bottom end is fine. Still stock rods, but didn't plan on making that much power. Now where it all goes wrong, and one of the main keys, there's two main keys here, is the camshaft. The camshaft is 100% completely wrong for this engine combination. These heads here, these are the old school double hump heads or camel hump heads, whatever you like to call them. So, from back in the day, this is old person build here. Double hump 202 heads, which isn't so bad if you're building a mild street car, but they do not flow well. What I did is I was reading a magazine article that had this big monster 383 engine and I selected a cam that they had used in their engine. Their engine had better heads, had bigger displacement. It was actually nothing like this engine, except for the fact that it was a small block. So I saw a big cam. I was like, well, the bigger the better, right? No, not when you're choosing a cam. Bigger is not better. This cam is a 562 lift and a 302 duration. That is large. This head does not flow nearly enough to support 562 lift. Matter of fact, these heads probably need a cam more in the 450 range. That would be probably pushing it, the maximum cam lift that you would have on this particular set of heads. Anything more than that and you're not gaining any power. Matter of fact, you're probably losing power. And with the 302 duration on this cam, not only is it going open really far, it's staying open a long time. So it's opening way too far, staying open way too long. Third thing on this cam, it has a very, well, not very, but pretty small LSA, lobe separation angle of 108. So that's the third thing that's wrong with this cam, lobe separation. So that means both valve intake and exhaust valve are open a little bit too long, with the valve opening too long, staying open too long, and both valves opening at the same time for too long. Everything, I mean, it's just probably just blowing compression right out the exhaust, and that's really hurting this engine. So that is that's pretty awful. But let's have a couple looks at the okay stuff. Okay, one more thing before we look at the good stuff. One more thing that was bad. It's not now because I've changed it out, but this is a Performer RPM air gap. Performer RPM air gap, yeah, intake. Dual plane, has a division here. This is a really good intake, low end torque intake. Now before this intake was on here, there was an Edelbrock Victor Jr. open plenum intake. It was a little bit taller intake, but it was open plenum. Open plenum is going to provide you more RPM up high, gonna shift your power curve from low to high. Now with this big of a cam in it, with the too big of a cam in it, that also is shifting the power band from low to high. So that was 2 points shifting the power band way up, and this engine wasn't revving that high, so it was barely even getting into the power band with being overcammed and having the wrong intake for the combination. I changed this intake when I later found out how intakes work, and this did help bring that power band down some. Definitely helped the engine, but still the cam is way too big for the combination, even with the intake on it. Now if we have a look in here, we'll look at the valve train real quick. These aluminum valve covers, I ordered these because, you know, I thought they were cool. They're like 300 bucks. Totally unnecessary, but I like them. Now, if you can see here, let's come down here a little bit. I have roller tip rockers on here with a 1.5 ratio these are really good rockers. Back in the day, they cost me 300 bucks for this set. ARP studs on the head. Everything right in this area is also pretty good stuff. The springs are, of course, upgraded because of the big scam, yeah, because of the big cam. I've taken all the bolts out of the intake. Let's pop it open here and see what we got. I haven't looked under here for a while. See if everything's faring all right. Everything is good. Everything's nice and clean on the inside of this engine. It's actually pretty clean. This one push rod is a little bit loose and maybe bent. We may have one slightly bent push rod. Besides that, everything looks pretty good here. I'm going to bring you in here and we'll look at some other work that I had done on this engine and trying to save the mistakes that I had made previously. Okay, I don't know how well you can see it, but I had these heads ported so they're nice and smooth, and opened them up a little bit to the circumference of these Felpro gaskets, and they are matched to this intake as well. So that was about, I don't know, $300, $400 that I had of work that I had done to these heads. And again, like adding the intake, opening up these ports did help with the airflow and the power production, but still they're not going to flow the numbers to support the cam. So no matter how much work I do to these heads, they are not going to work with this cam at all. I'm actually going to gain power on this engine by just taking the cam out, putting in a smaller cam, and that's really going to wake up this particular engine combination. Okay, let's zip these heads off real quick and have a look at some more disappointment. All right, we're ready to take these heads off. Now, before I take the heads off, one more thing I want to explain about this. Having too big of a cam means having too big of a spring. So not only are we opening up the valve too far and maybe losing some power, actually we are losing power by opening up the valves too far. Now, because we have to open up the valves that far, we have to use a bigger spring, a heavier spring. So cam is a parasitic loss. So when that cam rotates, it has to take force to push this valve spring down. Now it's having to put more pressure on these valves to open it because it's too big, and we're opening up further than we need, and we're putting more pressure on these springs than we need. So we're losing power at the valve because it's opening too far, and we're losing power in the parasitic loss that it takes to open the spring that extra amount that we don't need. Another loss, another thing we did wrong, and when I say we, I mean me. Let's get these heads off and have a look. We can find some more stuff that's wrong. Okay, these are, I can't remember what these are. These are TRWs maybe? I would have to look up that part number. Part number 2244P is 30 over, but I cannot remember what these pistons were. But as you can see, it's just a flat top. It's not domed or anything. There's some valve reliefs in there because, yeah, big cam. But that big cam had no problems. We have plenty of valve relief there in it. But if I was going to put pistons in this again, which I may or may not, I mean, we had it all apart. We could have put a dome piston in there You know, back in the day, everybody's like, oh, I got flat top pistons, 10.5 to 1 compression. Apparently, you know, that's what everybody equated flat top pistons to be without properly calculating in their combustion chambers or any of that good stuff. So everybody said flat top pistons. I bought flat top pistons, you know. I didn't know any better. But if I was to do it again, I'd put some domes in there and get a little bit better compression. You know, I didn't have 10.5 to 1 compression, not on this engine combination. But that's how we learn. There was no internet back then. We had Hot Rod magazine, so that's where I got a lot of my inspiration from. Unfortunately, I got some of that information wrong on the build of my engine. And we're going to have a look at these lifters real quick. At least I'm going to pull one up and have a good look at it. The lifters seem to be in pretty good shape. This is a solid flat tappet lifter. That's another thing I probably should have not put in at the time, was a solid lifter, because at that time I had no idea on how to adjust these things. Fortunately, the shop I had assembled this engine, they did a really good job of setting these, and with the billet aluminum roller rockers and the poly locks on it, it never really went out of adjustment. I didn't get any funny sounds or anything out of it, so I never had to adjust it, at least not until a few years ago when I took the heads off and had them redone. Matter of fact, I didn't even realize that I had put solid lifters in here until I went to lash the valves as if they were hydraulic lifters. I set them at 0 lash, went a quarter turn, tried to start the car, no compression. I couldn't figure it out for a while until I started backing them off, and this car started and ran a lot better. Then I realized, hey, these are solids, not hydraulics. So live and learn. So that's pretty much it on the valve train, the good, the bad of this engine. One thing I like about it, it has gear drive on it. I like the noise. That's about the only thing on the gear drive, but those are pretty good things to run. So I'm gonna finish disassembling this engine, pull the crank out, have it looked at, and then we'll reassemble this engine at a later date. So that's it for this StreetRat Garage Extra. Remember, bigger is not better.